I'm Lior Phillips, host of This Must Be the Gig. We're a weekly podcast that documents everything about the world of live music, speaking with choreographers, costume and set designers, the people who run beloved venues and festivals, and, of course, speaking with musicians about that one gig that changed their lives. Get your peek behind the curtain at consequenceofsound.net, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
It's easy to hear your favorite artist on WFPK from wherever you are. Listen on your smart speaker, live stream from our website at WFPK.org, from Louisville Public Media.
Consequence Podcast Network.
Welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith with an audio interview series presented by WFPK Independent Louisville at WFPK.org, Consequence of Sound, and the Consequence Podcast Network. Hello to all the subscribers. Thank you all for checking out every episode we put out. I know there's a lot out there, 3 a week with new ones every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I appreciate you keeping up. If you haven't given the series a rating or review, that's always a huge help. And if you're not a subscriber, take the moment before we get started to hit that subscribe button. Keep up with all the episodes every single week. It's a great way to know what all your favorite artists have been up to. I'm Kyle Meredith. Today is one of my favorite artists, Cold War Kids, talking with Nathan Willett once again. They've got a brand new record called New Age Norms. And the cool thing about this record, it's great as it is, but it's part 1 of 3, which means there's lots more to come. And not only will Nathan and I be talking about what the differences are between part 1, 2, and 3, but really diving into this first one. It's a fun record. It's got funk. It's got disco. We're going to hear what went into that whole process. And Nathan says one of the big things that's different about the songwriting is each song is really focused lyrically. That's his quote right there. I'm going to figure out what that means, especially when we compare that to some of the big themes that's going on in songs like Complainer and 4th of July. It's one thing to write a song that's socially reflective. It's another thing to make a song that really sticks, though. And there's definitely been a lot of thoughts that's gone behind that right there. And as I mentioned, we'll also hear about what to expect from parts 2 and 3, something earthy from the second one, he says, and a few surprises for that final part of the trilogy as well. Let's jump into it, talking about the record New Age Norms, Part 1. It's Kyle Meredith with Cold War Kids.
Hello.
Well, let's talk about New Age Norms, the first volume of 3 here. First off, I got to tell you that this record is so much fun to listen to. I mean, right from the beginning. It's one of the most fun records I've heard this year, so congratulations on this one.
Rad. Thank you. I'm excited about that. I think I definitely wanted it to be, like, part of it being kind of on the shorter end. I just realized that it's under 30 minutes.
Oh, right.
29 minutes or something. So, like, yeah, 8 songs. And I think, yeah, generally fun is something that I don't think we've necessarily probably a common adjective for us in the past. And so I think there's something, that was somewhere, not a goal per se, but something that I was definitely hoping to kind of have accomplished.
And, and you're hitting big themes on this, too, which we'll get to, heavier themes that kind of outweigh that fun. But musically, I mean, right from the beginning, Complainer, like you've teased funk before, but this feels like full on in that direction. I will say the idea that you just said of like teasing different things but going full on in a direction is definitely one that, like, that idea I've been more aware of, and going into this one was everything about the, like, sort of flirting with a genre or a feeling, like, let's just go all the way. There was a lot of, like, between Lars and I, a lot of conversations about that, about just kind of that feeling of, like, yeah, we've tried this before, like, the freedom that comes with having done this for a long time, and a sense of, like, if not now, what are we waiting for? Just kind of push it further. So that part of it was very fun to do that. Yeah. And yeah, Complainer, I think, goes all the way. We had our friends from Electric Guest, Asa and Matt, like, were in the studio some and helped with that song and a couple others, actually. So I think it had a big effect on the feel as well. I think that maybe the most surprising and maybe at the very second, my favorite on here is Waiting for Your Love, because as far as going full on, that's like disco heaven on that.
I love it, yeah.
You've always been able to move to Cold War Kids, but There's a new kind of groove happening there, and I don't know if you've got your Tom York dance moves down for something like that, but it seems like it'd be appropriate.
A little bit. I think there's always been a dancey element. It's in a lot of ways been a little like kind of spazzier and a little more like jerky.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we listen to a lot of 70s and 80s Stones, and there's definitely a lot of that like kind of rock, like some disco beats that we needed to get into. A lot of that feeling of a lot of music that we listen to going like, yeah, let's just go all the way with it.
So we'll talk about the other side now. There was an interview I'd read. You said each song is really focused lyrically. And again, so now we have the fun music, but kind of, as we said, weighing that with what you're tackling here. And not, I know not every song is taking on a really big subject. Some of it just sounds like, your personal stuff. But I was kind of wondering, like, when you say each song is really focused lyrically, do you find that different than you've done in the past?
Yeah, I think there have been records. I mean, it's interesting. It's also the nature of making a record that is sort of more open-ended, and there's something that happens that, if you realize as a singer and writer, if we have, 13 different songs, pieces of music that feel really good and really cool, and that I want to, finish lyrics on all of them, it is definitely a lot harder to make each one of those songs have lyrically their own little world that, has purpose and is its own thing. It's a lot easier to have certain songs that are much more abstract and not quite amazing. And so, yeah, that's how we've generally worked in the past. And yeah, so there's always a few songs that I kind of look at and I go like, I'm not sure exactly what is happening here, but of course I still love it and I'm proud of it, but this one, by biting off a smaller portion, like having 8 songs and knowing that, they are all stylistically really different than each other. I can, think of like the artists and the bands that remind me of probably, and the genres that each song separately would be described as, but also lyrically, yeah, they have their own world. They're not all sort of, there's not really like songs that were just kind of like lyrically written as filler or musically either, which again, it's just a nice thing about just by setting out to not just make a record and have whatever 12, 13 songs and then have the ones that just need to get done and don't have the same sort of singular purpose. So.
Right. Making everything counts in that way. It seems like it's even more pressure, when you've got to do it like that.
But to me, like record making, it's always like, I guess I feel like I'm never going to run out of ideas or run out of inspiration in the big, like macro sense. But in the moment, yeah, you definitely are going to find those days where you just kind of like, man, I got nothing. I'm not like, I don't see it, and so really recording and all making of art, like having the freedom to stretch it out and to go to work, to kind of make your work schedule work around when inspiration hits is an ongoing struggle and thing that you're trying to learn about yourself. And, that for me has been 15 years long of just kind of learning, like there are days when you just go to work and you work on songs. And then there are other days where like lightning strikes and you have great ideas. And of course you want to for me, in a lot of ways, the whole thing of recording, writing, touring for Cold War Kids, like it all becomes in one thing. It becomes a smoothie in one blender where like we're always touring. We're always, you could be deeply in the middle of a studio thing. There's always going to be, 2 festival shows that you build 3 more shows in, and suddenly you have a week tour on the East Coast right when you thought you were, deep in something. And so learning how to channel those, on, off, being gone, being home. I also have a family. I have 2 kids now. Learning how to just when you hit those sweet spot moments of being able to juggle it all, I think there's this misnomer that, like, if you're hyper focused on just the music and just, the recording, and that's all you could do, then you are going to get your best results. But, like, that's not true for me at all. I'm like much happier juggling and I also have to, like, we spend so much time being gone that I have to juggle my life and the writing and the touring and everything. And I think it makes it more, I want the songs to be me as well. I think this record is probably the closest to my heart, like the most that feels like stuff that is really immediately relevant to me, as opposed to something that is more abstract and more like something I'm setting out to do that's like cool and reflects the feeling. This is more immediate to me.
With all of that you're saying there, the touring, the family, etc., it makes it even more mind-blowing that this is part one of 3. Because, setting out to do an album is one thing. Setting out to do 3 albums with everything else that you've got going on, I mean, it's impressive to begin with. Now it's beyond that.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess there's a somehow connected to that is like there's a weird rhythm that you're a writer. There's a weird rhythm to anything creative that when you're doing it really well, it doesn't feel like work. The best parts of it don't feel like work. Mm-hmm. The getting to the studio, the scheduling, the arranging of so many things, those are all work, and but getting in there and finding that thing that feels like a big, release and expression that you get the feeling of like, oh my God, I'm so glad I got that thing in my head out into this song. That's the best feeling. So right. Of course I want that as much as I can. So yeah, it is work. It's more of the logistic scheduling and all of those things to do 3 records, but it's also like it actually, again, in the way that the rhythm of our life works with always touring and always hopping on, some festival thing, a lot of things come up last minute for us, and then a lot of things are just the regular, month on a bus of tour. And so I think this idea of sort of 3 records, it feels in a way like the records themselves, as not as the music, but as a thing that goes out into the world. It feels more disposable in this way that feels just very natural to me. I don't know how to say that better. There's that feeling that when you start to tour a record, and sometimes you even get on a bus for a month before a record comes out, and you're starting to play these new songs, and then the record comes out, and you're talking about it, and people are listening to it some, and already you're aware of whatever the flaws and failures of that record, or what could be better, or what you want to do to move on from it, but you're in it for a while, for at least a year and a half or something. So yeah, this is a way of kind of being like, all right, you want the audience to be in as close of a place with you as you can be. So this record coming out now, we're still already past it and finishing, volume 2 and 3, but at least it's like a lot closer. You know what I mean? It feels like we're on a journey together.
Yeah.
I mean, the artist, you've always got to be 2 steps ahead of your audience in terms of like what you're releasing, what you're talking about every day. You're talking about these songs that, for all intents, are kind of behind you. But I like that. I don't want to sit there and talk about a song that's kind of behind me and have nothing new on my plate, because that makes me uncomfortable. I want to be already working on the next thing, and that gives me more joy and more mystery talking about the previous thing that we finished before. So, yeah.
Well, I think it also goes to, to complement your actual songwriting, because this record, New Age Norms Volume 1, is so full of little perfect songs. I mean, so many hooks strung throughout this. I think that's the impressive thing, knowing that there's 2 records. Knowing, you didn't hold anything back, it seems like. It's like, okay, here's everything good because we're going to bring you more good.
Yeah. Again, I love the first thing you said, and really gets me so excited, just like calling it a fun record, like a fun listen, not a fun record that there's not serious themes and heavy stuff, but that is, you want kind of that feeling that it hasn't been really thought through and cooked for a long time. And yeah, I mean, there are songs like Complainer, Dirt in My Eyes, like those songs, lyrically, I changed so much, and like went in and sang one time, and then would call Lars and be like, "Hey man, I just got to come in and change these 2 lines," and little things like I did that so much on this record, but I also, I had this deep seated feeling of like, this is making it better. I don't want to like overcook anything, but a lot of the songs, were realized that way with like me kind of like jumping into the studio for these periods and getting a better perspective of the song and what it's trying to say, as opposed to something like, me, I guess, more sitting at home and writing lyrics in a way that is attempting to kind of get a whole idea out at one time and then going in to sing it all at one time and sort of that being it, which is, again, a band making a record. That's how we've operated a lot of the time. It's sort of like singer needs to write that thing and get one shot getting it all out, as opposed to being able to build it over time.
Well, we've talked about it, kind of mentioned it here, and I do want to hit on some of these songs and what you're singing about, because the last time we had talked, was a previous record with L.A. Divine, and that was part of the conversation then. I mean, you were being reflective of the world at that point. Complainer, I want to say, is easily one of my favorite songs of the political era. It says something to everybody, It feels different than a lot of the other songs that we have heard, good and bad from many artists.
I think of like the idea of a song with a message is potentially like more effective than ever, and also potentially more alienating than ever. A song with a heavy-handed, narrow message can, I think, make an artist look more stupid than ever. You know what I mean? Like, I think you risk looking self-righteous and so just, in your bubble by having a simple answer for any kind of message that you want to send. And so it's tricky. I think it's very tricky. And I think the writing is, again, it's not like a science where you're sitting down and trying to calculate what do people want to hear, but in my own writing, being able to look at stuff that I'm writing that might be an emotional expression of what I want to say, but I do have to look at, what does this look like to people that are going to hear our music? And like, does it look preachy? Does it look simplistic? And is it igniting some emotion for a large group of people that is really unhelpful? And like, I think those are important questions. And, again, I don't know. When I list different artists that I listened to, in the last year, and see certain things that, I don't know, somebody said something like, when Trump was elected, they're like, oh, this is going to be great for, rock music or like punk music, there's going to be all this anger or something. And it's like, that's dumb. That's really dumb. That's not insightful or, like anger itself on its own is not a virtue. It's not something that is in itself leading to positivity or goodness. So in a song, it's got to sound like very natural and like a thought, not filtered. So finding those things takes time. It's not the expressing it is should feel quick and effortless, but it's the searching yourself, I think, going into it, that takes time.
What I especially love about that song, just furthering what you say too, is it's not exactly an answer, it's an inspiration. Because again, everybody's online complaining. I get online and I complain too. Yeah. But it's that pushing forward. You're not telling anyone exactly what to say, although I think if you follow your band, you probably understand what you would want you to say, want us to say. But it's just that inspiration. Like, you can only take this so far on here. If you want to change the world, get your ass up, which I absolutely love.
I'm so happy with how it came out, and I'm so happy that it says enough.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, so that's volume 1. We know the volume 2 is coming at the beginning of the year. You've talked about it a little bit. Sean Everett's behind the board on this one. We're such a big fan of his production around here as well. When you say that we should expect raw and earthy, what does that mean for volume 2? exactly?
I guess in a lot of ways the kind of catalyst for separate records within one theme was that we have a lot of different ways that we have worked over the years, and a lot of those ways are really great. Some of them are like myself and Lars in a room together writing songs and moving slowly and thoughtfully, and then the sort of polar opposite of that we have also had many success and failures with is being a band in a room with the producer and having 5, 6 people in a room constantly writing, playing, performing, recording, making music together, and having it sort of be that much more chaotic process and it's also a very quick process when you have a group of people in a room getting ideas and writing songs together. But that's how we started as a band. And that was our MO from the beginning. And so, yeah, with Sean and his style, it just was such a perfect time for us to do that. A lot of because LA Divine and New Age Norms Volume 1 were much more like myself and Lars, and knowing that I have, the greatest band, that I'm not totally letting us all be unleashed in a room to create noise together. I knew that I needed to do that. And that's, so being able to do that with Sean Everett is like the greatest kind of, the Cold War Kids, the side of us that is, a live band that loves to play off of each other. That side of us has been bottled up for a little while. So like, this is a great release of that.
Well, I can't wait to hear it, especially, for as good as number 1 is here. You've really set me up for number 2.
Good.
Awesome.
Yeah, and we've got some good surprises for number 3 that are also still getting finished. So yeah, it's really fun. It gives a place for a lot of ideas that you would have had to think about how it makes sense in one record before, but now being able to keep these things, keep them coming. It's a nice way to be able to spread the ideas out.
Well, it certainly makes being a fan a lot of fun too. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Nathan, it's been fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time again today and catching up about this. I so love New Age Norms 1. Looking forward to 2, man, and we'll see you out there.
Thank you so much for your questions and everything, and see you soon.
All right, man, take care.
Okay, you too. Right. Bye-bye. And
my thanks, Nathan Willett. Cold War Kids, Part 1 of New Age Norms. It's out now. Now, Nathan and I have actually spoken several times throughout the years. I thought I would include 2 more of those interviews while we're here. And this next one goes back just a couple years, 2017. Going into this year, the band had found a sleeper hit with their song First back in 2014 on the record Hold My Home, giving them some breathing room going into 2017's LA Divine. So Nathan and I got to talk about some of the album's back against the wall characters and political tracks. It's part 2 of Kyle Meredith with Cold War Kids.
The compliments first. LA Divine is a fantastic record, again, which is something
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's something you guys do over and over. I'm listening to it, and I was sort of wondering, as I listened to the characters, and this isn't exactly a new thing for your writing, but it seems like a lot of these characters are in a bad spot, maybe to the point of desperation.
Yeah, I mean, I always think that's where things get most interesting, in that desperate place. So, I mean, I guess it is interesting to say, like, whether it's in a bad way, I think that in a lot of ways, a lot of that good, that moment of crisis, whether like spiritual or physical or whatever, that like, you do have the opportunity to kind of, rise out of it, to kind of transcend, and those moments are actually kind of, of desperation can kind of be good moments as well.
You give your characters a fighting chance. That's nice of you.
Oh, yeah. They're not doomed.
I always kind of felt that about myself, too. It is those moments artistically when your back's up against the wall that it seems to, that's when the best opportunities end up happening.
Yeah, it's there's one book that I read during the making of this record that was a writer called Richard Rohr. He wrote a book called Falling Upward that is actually very much about that. It's about like kind of how starting with kind of like Homer and the Iliad and the idea of like, the journey, even after he comes home from his great life's journey, and he kind of has has this amazing experience of victory and winning his battles and everything, and that it's that moment when you come home and you kind of get depressed and you go, what now? What is what's my purpose? What's my journey now? That's kind of when it starts. And I thought, man, that is a really and he kind of goes on to show how in the Western world we're very ill-equipped to understand that that it is those moments of desperation and crisis that we're defined by, and that they are as much a gift as a struggle. And so I love that stuff.
It's a very human thing. In fact, I think about some of the lyrics, and you've got one that has the line, "I don't feel invincible," and yet it comes right after one that sounds like it's written about a superhero.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think anybody watching the news, always, but especially in the last year, and especially with, shootings, that there's just a sense of man, and part of it's age, part of it's for me, that everybody gets to that point in their life when they don't feel invincible anymore, but also just in general, I think there's just a sense where people are part of the record too, I think the concept is that living in LA, it is kind of, I mean, and let's see, how do I say this? I think there's a universal thing. I think in a lot of cities in the world, you hear about violence and you go, oh, that's over there. That would never happen here. But it's a strange thing, because once there's and then once in a while you hear about something terrible, a tragedy in a city that you go, oh wait, but that's just a regular city, or that's my city, that is my city away from home or something. And then it just has that different face on it. And I think LA is funny because it projects its own, it has a universally understood myth about itself as being kind of movie-like and sort of maybe above the possibility of certain tragedy happening, especially on a kind of a terror level or something. But yeah, so I think that's kind of definitely going on there in that song, Invincible.
Well, it seems like what you're talking about leads into especially a Wilshire protest, which is a really powerful moment of this record, with sort of the poem over the top. But I'd also be curious where the music come from in that, because the music's really interesting, what's going on there.
Yeah, there was, there's three kind of vignettes on the record, and little I thought of it in the way of it's funny, is almost finished with the record, and I was kind of just at home by myself working on these songs that I guess I felt almost like in a hip hop record, how a skit can inform kind of just the vibe and the culture of a record in a way that almost songs can't quite get that close. And so, yeah, it just became a cool way to be the Wilshire protest was something that it was the first post-election kind of LA protest, and I got to go to and just kind of write from a perspective of just almost like a journalist, an observer, and think about it in the context of LA and how kind of separated we are from each other. And yeah, it was fun to create all three of those songs just kind of after the record and think about, what are the songs trying to say that these kind of little vignettes can even go further on.
I love the way they tied it together. And then, with you guys being part of the 30 Days, 30 Songs, I mean, the way you're, the songwriting approach right now is, I love it. I love what you're doing. And it should note, too, that even with all these things that you're talking about, the music almost contradicts all of that, because the music is always so upbeat and joyful. And it sounds like you guys, it sounds like one of those lines you hear during the press run for anybody, but it actually sounds like you guys are having even more fun than usual in all this. So
yeah, definitely. I really think that to have 6 records, and I think there's in between phases. There's always going to be growing pains and finding out who you are. I think the song First and how well it did on the last record, and how it definitely gave me a kind of a renewed sense of oh, okay, we're not just kind of struggling to keep our head above water here. There's something that kind of came full circle, the sound of the first record, even that, and the kind of simplicity of we really wrote around the piano this time around, and I think that really helped have, for me, just a lot of freedom, especially in the early days, the first few records. I didn't want to be behind the piano with every song, and, after the fourth record, we had Matt Schwartz join, and he, as a piano player, he can play everything, so I don't have to be thinking about that anymore. I can just kind of think about, making the piano the center, but not also having to be behind it every night. So I can be out front, and those are the little things that actually have a huge effect on the record for a band like us that does come from kind of like primarily a touring is where we spend a lot of our time. So yeah, it is definitely like, it's a lot of years of learning about your strengths, and I'm just so happy to keep doing it, and it is a really fun phase right now.
Yeah, well, I love it, and I thank you for the music, and it's nice to talk to you again, Nate. Thanks again for the conversation today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's very encouraging. Thank you.
No problem. Take care, man.
Okay, you too.
Right, bye.
A 2017 interview with Nathan Willett of Cold War Kids talking about the record L.A. Divine. Now jump even further back, 2011. I do believe this is the very first time that we got to speak. I caught up with him backstage at Bonnaroo that year to catch up about the record just released called Mine Is Yours. So enjoy some more bonus content. It's part 3 of Kyle Meredith with Cold War Kids. It's Bonnaroo 2011. Cold War Kids. Welcome, fellas.
Thank you.
Hi. Yeah. Very well, very well.
Yeah.
Holding up so far?
Holding up. Yeah, holding up.
The usual question, have you done this one before?
One time. Yeah. And, I think 2007, I think.
Seven or 8.
Yeah. One of those.
Reactions, memories?
We actually did a fun thing when we were here. We did, we played a kind of a set in one of these little tents with Elvis Perkins, Clap Your Hands, Say Yeah, and Dr. Dog dudes. We had all been touring at the time, and this was many years ago.
And
that was fun.
Alec too, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that. That's all coming back now.
Yeah.
That's so long ago.
That was here. That was in this very
Tennessee
place. Yeah,
This very
that
state.
was fun. Yeah.
Well, I've been really enjoying the new record. It's been out for a few months. Let's talk a little bit about that. It's been written about plenty, but you guys kind of went for the bigger sound this time, it seemed. Is that accurate?
Yeah, the previous 2 records we had recorded mostly live, very spontaneous, and this record we actually were in Nashville for a couple months recording it, and we there was a different intent going into it. There's a lot more layering of sounds and instruments and guitars, and it was a different approach. We're really happy about it.
And, you even went with a producer this time. Different producer?
Guy Jakir King, he lives in Nashville. So
Because I didn't know how to say that name.
yeah, it's a tricky one.
Had you done the producer before? I think I'd read maybe that you hadn't.
Well, we've had we've worked with a few different guys, yeah, but this was in ways like the more we were inviting more input in this time, yeah.
And give ourselves much more time. We had only given ourselves a few days in the studio for each record before, like 2 weeks at the most. 1 week at the first one was 1, so we spent close to 3 months in the studio for this one, yeah.
So, did the songwriting take place in that? Did you guys go in with the songs, or was that?
We went in without any completed songs. We wanted to be able to really make changes in the studio.
Now that you had the compare and contrast on that, do you prefer a certain way, or is it still model by model?
I think I don't know. We're kind of getting into that time. We're going to make some more choices about how we will approach the next project, and I don't know. I think we might take a little bit of both. I would. Being in a studio situation where you don't have complete songs is a good it's a good way to stress yourself out. It can be really positive, and is also it can make you crazy. And I think we'll probably go into the studio with things more complete this time. But also I'm not sure what the different direction or scheme will be this time around. Yeah.
One thing I really enjoyed this time around was you guys got a bit heavier into the remix game, especially with the title track. It seemed was that you guys? Was it label?
We had wanted to do have people remix a few songs off the record, and it worked out really well. We had Passion Pit, Yay Sayer, the dudes.
Cool Kids guys, yeah.
Blended Babies.
Yeah. There's some other ones too.
Yeah, we're forgetting some. But
how do you
to have people do interpretations and
I mean, do you guys really get into that? Was it weird hearing it in a different way, and were you cool with putting it out right away, or was it a really selective process?
It was not that selective. I think we got a lot of them back, and remixes are nice because in a way it reflects the artist who is doing the remixing more than your own song, and it's on their shoulders in a way, kind of more to have a cool interpretation of it.
There's also been quite a lot of EPs through the years. Is there any plans for maybe another one of those here and there?
There's been talk. There's been some talk. We like doing the EPs. We like because it's especially in this day and age where there's so much emphasis on I guess kind of the bigger release, and at the same time you put an EP out and you don't even really need to announce it, and you don't. The record label or the press or whatever, kind of has to catch up to it instead of trying to prepare. So, yeah.
Well, good luck on the Bonnaroo set. Great 2011. Congratulations on the new CD again. We're really enjoying it. So.
Thanks.
Guys.
Right on.
We're out. And there it is, wrapping up my own trilogy of Cold War Kids interviews. Again, look out for the first of their new trilogy, New Age Norms. Part 1 is out now. Part 2 coming at the beginning of 2020. And thanks to you for sticking with the episode all the way through the end. I really do appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed already, you can grab us anywhere you get your favorite podcasts, including iTunes, Apple Podcasts, also Spotify, YouTube. Really, wherever you're listening from right now, grab your listening device, type in Kyle Meredith with, and subscribe. And if you're already a subscriber and hanging with us, and if you haven't given the series a rating or review, please do that before you get out of here as well. It's always a huge help. After that, head to WFPK.org, where I do a show every Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern. It's an hour full of song premieres, music news, anniversary spins, and bonus interviews. Again, that's WFPK.org. Consequence of Sound has your music and film news. You can also find me at Twitter, at Kyle Meredith, and Facebook/Kyle Meredith. And that does it for another edition. I'm Kyle Meredith. I'll see you next time.
Consequence Podcast Network.